figure out what you're good at and make that your passion of being the best at whatever that is. And that's where you can kind of find joy. That's where you can find that motivation on something that on the surface may not necessarily excite you. Being kick-ass at it is what can.
Today, I'm speaking with the amazing Sarah Rich. Not only is Sarah VP of Operations and Customer Success at SupplyFrame, she was actually the first employee the company hired back in 2003. Ever since then, Sarah's presence has been essential in the growth of SupplyFrame. Today, Sarah and I talk about how cloud-based technology has changed over the last 20 years, plus the importance of mentorship in tech and some practical career advice. We live in a time where design and technology touch every aspect of our lives. But where did it all come from? Who designed it? How is it built and brought to market? What will it look like in a year, 2 years, 100 years? From the phones and smartwatches that help us in our day-to-day to the cutting-edge spaceships and 3D printers that are leading us into the future, modern design is constantly shaping the way we work, communicate, problem solve, and play. And every new design, big or small, starts with an idea and a bill of materials. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb, where we talk to leading innovators in the tech world and celebrate the transformational power of design. Here's my interview with Sarah Rich. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to The Bomb. So excited to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, so you are employee number 2 of SupplyFrame. And so I think we should start there. You are one of the best storytellers I know. And so I would love to have you give us a little bit of a history of SupplyFrame. Unfortunately, we don't have all day to get into it. And I know there's a million great stories you could tell us.
Yep.
But I realized, in thinking about previous episodes of The Bomb that we haven't really gotten in depth, about the history of SupplyFrame, its startup journey. And, with the recent acquisition, I would love for our listeners to have a little more detail on that.
Sure. So SupplyFrame was birthed in 2003. So we're rolling up on 20 years. And it really was the brainchild of Steve Flagg and Kai Meldenberger, who started the company coming from on one side, Steve grew up in the electronics industry himself, in distribution, and seeing a need for change and evolution and automation and all the things that we talk about every day today. He saw that very early on, along with some mentors he had, and then Kai from the technology side. And so they started the company, and we were initially focused on more of the supply chain side and building out software that was cloud-based. At the time, now we say SaaS all the time. I think it was called web-hosted software back then. We didn't even have that word. And so, the idea was to kind of build some of these tools and these platforms and applications that make for a much more efficient exchange of information, things we take for granted a little bit today. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, we were a little bit ahead of our time. And so while we did have some customers and got some footing very quickly, unfortunately, many companies were still very, very nervous about putting their data outside of their 4 walls. And so we ended up having to pivot the company a little bit to keep ourselves afloat and keep money coming in because we were a for-profit company. And what we ended up doing is realizing that, again, kind of on the forefront, realizing engineers and people that are actually building the technology of tomorrow are no longer looking at magazines. They're no longer having conversations with folks at semiconductor companies and peer-to-peer engineering as much. They're online and they're doing a lot of their research digitally. And so we recognized that early on and said, hey, we think that we can really help with that in building out resources that help these individuals find more information more quickly, thinking about all the content that's out there. And we kind of went down the path of content, but realizing, oh man, that's a very, very heavy endeavor. And it takes a while to build a following and an audience and all of that. So while we did build it, we also partnered up with other companies that were doing the same. And it allowed us to create this ecosystem that companies could come in and actually advertise and connect with these engineers and showcase what technology they have, and gives these engineers and people that are researching products and the technology that's out there to be able to find it really quickly and engage in ways right online, right? Again, what we take for granted today. Back when this was happening, it was still a little bit new. People didn't necessarily have a strategy. Companies were trying to make the transition from how they used to do things on paper, let's say, catalogs and that kind of thing, to the digital world. And so, because we were kind of at the forefront of this digital age type of mentality, it allowed us to really kind of help our customers evolve in a lot of ways. From there, as we were kind of building out that part of the business, the supply chain, the software side of the business still kept going. And as time continued on, we realized, okay, the industry is changing now. It's starting to be a little bit more open to having your data outside, having connections with other types of supply chain partners. And so we kind of leaned back in and started building out again applications that not only were in the world that we were already working on kind of the sourcing side of things, but even further what we call upstream on the engineering world, and helping to make a very much more connected type of a platform that allows for all of these things that happen throughout the life cycle of a product. Once an engineer designs it, once they start making changes, they start getting out and figuring out if it's viable for production, all of the steps that happen along the way. Let's build tools and applications that allow for that exchange of information. And that's what we've been doing for the last few years, is kind of leaning back into all of that. What this allows us to do then, if you think about all the things I described, is we now have, from that ecosystem of where engineers are out there researching to all these platforms and applications that are out there. We made some acquisitions in the course of time. FindChips is a platform most people use. Right? Yep, exactly. And some other sites, Hackaday communities, and some access for models, 3D models. We acquired those along the way to kind of augment this ecosystem that SupplyFrame has amassed, that allows us to have a very good sense of what's happening in the industry. All of these things that are happening, all these signals, all of these activities are really kind of lending themselves to insights and forecasting and predictions and information in a digestible format, that our intent is to layer across this entire thing into each of these solutions that help people make better decisions. Right. So it's really kind of an end-to-end type of a solution. I always talk about, if I had a PowerPoint slide, I could show you all the different entities and how this all works. But the idea is we're building this world where it allows for all of these companies to connect in a much more effective, meaningful, helpful way with information that you wouldn't necessarily have access to just in your own four walls and what you do day to day.
Right. And would you say our main clients are still electronic components manufacturers and distributors, right? Or is it much broader than that as far as like who SupplyFrame serves? Yeah,
it's become much more broad. So we started out back when I was describing in the beginning on the sourcing side of things. Our main company segment was EMS providers, contract manufacturers. Mm-hmm. These are the guys that are constantly looking for information on product because they're the ones that are building the next iPhone of tomorrow or whatever it is. So, we then pivoted away a little bit from that and started to build out into the engineering audience, as we described, component manufacturers, semiconductor companies being able to advertise for sure, serving that industry. But now as we've come back and built out more applications, we're really focusing on the OEM world. So the Apples of the world that are designing that iPhone, for them to be able to connect and have information, some of these insights and things like that, that help them build better products right from the get-go.
Sourcing intelligence that we've been talking about.
That sourcing intelligence.
So I'd love to rewind a little bit and talk about your personal professional journey and how you started at SupplyFrame. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your origin story, how you got started working with Steve, and then I'll have more follow-up questions about your current, role and kind of career phase.
Yeah, no problem. So I don't know if you can tell by my accent. I actually grew up in the Midwest.
No way.
Exactly. So I hear my A's and my O's a little bit. So graduated from Michigan State, knew I didn't want to stay in the Midwest. And so I hightailed it out to Portland, Oregon, just to get the hay out and experience something new. Right away, my high school jobs and even my first jobs out of college were all very customer focused. I was always around people. I was always, in customer service, customer support, kind of in front, kind of being a face to the company type of a thing. And so I had a role in kind of recruiting and customer service around a temp agency when I was up in Portland. But eventually I made my way down to Las Vegas, kind of a interesting year and a half of my life, where I connected with Steve. At the time, he was working for a company, used to be Marshall Industries, with Rob Roden was his mentor, got acquired by Avnet, but then Rob Roden started a company called eConnections, and it was basically kind of doing some of the same things. It was supply chain automation solutions, but of course it was very ahead of its time, and unfortunately didn't make it because of the .com bust and some other things that were going around in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I ended up connecting with Steve at that time and was actually part of eConnections for a period of time. Unfortunately, like I said, it didn't make it, but Steve had noticed that, hey, there is something here. And because he had spent years in the electronics industry, he definitely, kind of was on the bandwagon of, hey, we need to make some changes. This industry needs to evolve. And so that's where he started SupplyFrame, what became SupplyFrame. And so he tapped me as somebody that had done customer success and customer service. And we weren't calling it customer success back then, customer service training, that kind of thing. When I was at eConnections for him, he tapped me to come and do the same thing at SupplyFrame as we rebuilt, what was essentially what we call QuoteFX. It was the predecessor was at eConnections, the product that we had.
And here we are 20 years later, and you're VP of Operations and Customer Success.
Yes.
I got that right?
You did.
It's like practicing.
Yes.
And could you tell us, what really led you to stick with SupplyFrame throughout all these years? What have you found exciting about this industry or about your role and how it's evolved all the way, up to now the recent acquisition with Siemens?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that come to mind. First of which is Steve Flagg, number one. He definitely was somebody that I said, I am hitching my star to your wagon, I think is the way that phrase goes. Just a incredible combination of somebody that is a visionary, that can see the future, that is bold and puts bets on the table, but isn't afraid to roll up his sleeves and do it. He's that kind of unique blend of, down to earth, as well as able to kind of see, what the art of the possible, so to speak. And
and I think he's done a great job of really pushing that culture throughout the company and inspiring 100%. That in so many of us as 100%.
Well. And giving us, I would say, the leeway to do it, right? I mean, SupplyFrame it's funny that you kind of practiced my title. We're not very title heavy usually. We all kind of wear different hats and different titles depending on what we're trying to do. And that to me has been the beauty of SupplyFrame as well, right? Being able to kind of lean in and help and try to figure things out and try my hand at different parts of the organization and what we need to do to move things forward. I'm very much again, customer centric. So being able to help companies evolve, to help companies do better at what they do every day, to partner with individuals, to partner with some of the supply chain folks that I've been working with for 20 years and really see them grow and their journeys as well. That's always been something that kind of gives me great joy, so to speak. And I think just kind of the industry in general is in such a state of change that's where opportunity happens, right? When you shake things up, whether you are intentional or you're forced to change in some ways, that's always a chance to improve or grow or learn, those types of things. And being in an industry and being at a company that is at the forefront of that is really what keeps me going every day.
I love that you see that as opportunity and something that you're inspired and motivated by, because I think so many people can feel overwhelmed by that oh, they have to constantly, learn a new software, learn a new, terminology, or learn these things. I agree. That's something that keeps me interested and excited, I think, in this industry as well. And within the fabrication space and design space too, it's there's always something new to learn. And I think that keeps it fresh and,
100%.
I just keep saying exciting, but exciting.
Yeah.
So I really look up to you in this company. You've been an amazing mentor to me and so many others. And I think that that's something you've expressed, that you're kind of focusing on more and more at this stage in your career as well, which I think is awesome. And I'd love to hear, in previous conversations, you've kind of mentioned, your dream job might have been to star on Hollywood or be in a musical or something. And I
was going to be a Broadway dancer. Yeah. I was convinced. Absolutely.
You are our SupplyFrame hostess with the mostest, designated host at all times for our parties, for our events, everything. You just know how to captivate our audience, and it's really inspiring. But how have you found, how have you really continue to kind of craft your role, and what kind of, I guess, tips do you have for others who feel oh, maybe I haven't quite found what industry makes sense, but I think you've described before, how to really hone in your skills and focus on what are your strengths and your individual, parse out what are you good at, what do you enjoy doing, and kind of find a career out of that. So I'd love to hear you,
Sure.
elaborate on that more.
I mean, I say this to a lot of people I have over the years, and I say this to anybody that's kind of new in their career, and not even new. It can be at any point in your career. The ultimate is if you find something that you're completely passionate for, right, about, that you can find a job in that you get paid to do what you love every day. That doesn't happen for everybody. So find out what you're good at and kill it. Just absolutely go all out on being really good at something that you're naturally good at doing. That's how I got into what I do every day. Yes, customers and all of that. I was good with people, et cetera, but I did not dream of being the VP of operations. That was not what my 7-year-old was doing while I was listening to the Annie soundtrack off Broadway. I was absolutely figuring out how I was going to dance and be one of the orphans. I figured out that I was really good at it, right? I've got the organizational mind. I have the ability to kind of see when there's a problem. I can see it sequenced in my head, how we have to attack it step by step. I can rally people. I can figure out who has what skills in what area. I realized that I was good at it, so I just leaned in hard. Figure out what you're good at and make that your passion of being the best at whatever that is. And that's where you can kind of find joy. That's where you can find that motivation on something that on the surface may not necessarily excite you. Being kick-ass at it is what can. And so that's something that I always try to encourage people. Spend time being honest with yourself. Do all the stuff online that has different types of evaluations that you can figure out what your strengths are. Talk to people. Ask them, what do you see in me? What do you think I'm naturally good at? What do you think I'm not as good at? Maybe I should be shying away, or where can I get further training or education or what have you? I would also say, don't be afraid to ask for help. I know that sounds very cliche, but I mean it in a way that you don't have to be good at everything yourself. What makes you valuable is figuring out a team of people that can help you be good at everything you're trying to do. So ask for help. Ask for people that know more than you. Ask them to help you, and you'll learn things along the way. You'll get things done. You'll have fun doing it. Those are the things that really, I think, are not necessarily taught in school, but that's where I found a lot of success.
Totally. No, I love that. Get to know yourself really well. And like you said, find the team, find the people that are going to help you, get to the next level and help carry out your vision or whatever you see as your strengths, support your strengths and whatnot. So those are great tips. Thank you so much. And, and I feel like something else that comes to mind that I have 2 younger brothers, so I'm also like talking to them about this stuff sometimes and thinking about, maybe like, I think, you probably weren't ever imagining operations, because that's also something that isn't really taught. That's not one of the categories of jobs in the world when you're growing up.
Take Ops 101 in college or anything, right?
But I think about how sometimes also, I think something that's, we've discussed here that's helped you, stay at SupplyFrame is the company culture too. And like thinking about, there's so many roles or professions, out there that you can understand, your strengths, you have the right skills for it, but then they can be placed at so many different types of companies. Like I've talked to my brother, for example, about software engineering. He's sort of interested in, but he's like, I don't want to work at, maybe a software company, but I'm like, you can do software engineering for so many different industries. You know what I mean? Like it could be for something that's focused on environmental sustainability, or it could be for a nonprofit, or it could be, so many different applications. And so I think that's something too, like operations, you could be working at so many different, in so many different industries in so many different places around the world, but thinking kind of bigger picture about that, like not necessarily, this means I have to work in this kind of place, I think
it's a good point to think about. Number one, especially in the technology sector, technology is just getting more and more pervasive in everything that we do, right? So, finding the right company or industry or type of organization that interests you, it's becoming much more easy to do because it's so pervasive, so vast, right? I think it's important too to take any kind of role and get out of the title, get out of the actual responsibilities, think about and break it down. What's really involved there?
What are you really doing?
Exactly. And that's really where you're going to find so much around those transferable skills. I have a friend actually that I'm in the process of taking her through. She used to do compliance and, kind of reading through healthcare initiatives and some of the regulations that were coming through on, kind of the healthcare world. I'm helping her make the leap over into technology with privacy consulting and things like that, where it's same concept. It's just different content that you're dealing with. I have somebody that I hired. She was an elementary school teacher. She's now working for us as a software trainer, right? If you think about the skills that she applied and commanding a room and maybe getting kids who didn't necessarily want to be there and learn and getting them excited. Same thing happens with adults that you're teaching software to. There were some things that we were able to break down and figure out how can you actually apply those skills? So it's important to kind of do that, not only as somebody who's hiring folks, but also the other way around, as somebody who's looking for jobs or thinking about, what you're good at. boil it down to those kind of core functions or core skills, and then kind of think about where those can apply. That can be very helpful in figuring out, where you can go.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear from Sarah about the latest SupplyFrame developments, the Siemens acquisition, and what she's looking forward to in the future. Welcome back to The Bomb. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and today we're interviewing Sarah Rich. She's VP of Operations and Customer Success, and she was employee number 1 in 2003. SupplyFrame has evolved and reinvented itself over the years, and that's par for the course in the tech industry. So speaking about a constantly evolving industry and the ways that SupplyFrame has, changed over the years, we've gone through a very big change recently.
Yes.
In August of 2021.
Yep.
Am I right? I'm gotta get the year.
Yep.
August 2021, we were acquired by Siemens.
Yes.
And that was huge and very exciting, successful, step for the company and for, I think all of you that have been there since the beginning, really huge kind of accomplishment. And so could you tell us a little bit about why you think SupplyFrame was acquired by Siemens during that time? I think that a lot, with what was going on in the world, going on in the electronics industry, of course, kind of the climate of the industry really affected that. But also, as you talked about, SupplyFrame's experience and kind of always being a little bit ahead of the curve and in the industry. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, why we were interesting and valuable to Siemens and a little bit about, now what you're excited about with that change.
So I think, Siemens obviously a massive company, and they're massive for a reason. They are extremely successful and have also been on the forefront in a lot of ways in, not only just the technology sector, software, manufacturing, things where they've been trying to get companies to evolve into a much more connected digital world. Those types of things has been part of what Siemens has been about for many, many years. And as we got connected with them, what really excited them was two things. One, that we were in that same mindset. They saw us as being, a company that has been on the forefront and has really kind of challenged the status quo just like they have, which is a good fit culturally. But even more so, the electronics specifically and the ecosystem we built and the access to that visibility into what all is going on. If you think about the things that we are able to kind of look at and have insights to and help companies to bring that information to life in their day-to-day on the supply chain side, everybody was feeling that directly themselves. The word supply chain was never used before. Now all of a sudden my family knows what I do because everybody hears about supply chain and disruptions and what can actually happen. We all lived it. And so thinking about what we were trying to solve right from the get-go in one of the largest industries out there in the high-tech electronics space is only going to continue to get bigger. If we take that and plug that into the Siemens ecosystem that they have and bring that information to light across their entire platforms and working with their customers and their engineering teams and the companies that are trying to build, again, products for tomorrow, it's just the opportunities are endless, right? In terms of kind of that next level that can be brought to life. And so I think that's really where the vision is kind of bringing this type of visibility and thinking. Interestingly enough, Siemens is going through a transition themselves as well. They built a lot of these types of large scale platforms that are widely used across, Fortune 500 companies all over the globe. However, they started out as an on-prem type of provider. They most recently have been moving into a SaaS environment or a SaaS model, which has been a big step for them as well. So they actually even look at us as somebody that can help them understand. We grew up as SaaS right from the get-go, the web hosted, whatever we were calling it back then. And so we've been able to kind of give them a little bit of guidance on here's how you think about selling and servicing and supporting and making these engagements successful in a new business model that maybe they haven't had as much exposure to, but are making the transition to. So there were a lot of kind of stars aligning. The market was a little bit crazy at the time and in a good way, with a lot of money going towards kind of this next chapter, next stage evolution of companies with technology. And so it was just perfect timing for both sides.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to see. I even just learned a little bit out of that, so thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in thinking about the future with Siemens, we're about a year and a half in now, right?
Yep.
And so what do you see as kind of like, what are you really excited about as far as new initiatives or what we're working on throughout this integration in the next year and, even a few years out from now?
I think just the opportunity and the art of the possible, we call it, right? So, if we think about the customers that Siemens has, customers we have, the technology that we're building and how easily these can plug in together to create something that just doesn't exist anywhere. It's endless as to what we can do with it. And, bringing in the insights that we have, bringing in the technology that they have, helping companies to truly digitally transform, getting back to that word, creating this next generation of digital twinning and how that all can help both upstream and downstream on supply chains and manufacturing. It's really kind of, what the movies are made of, how we can really see technology coming to life in, the next generation. So I think the exciting part is now that we've been able to connect and figure out how do we fit together and how do we, get the teams working together, the wind at our sails is just going to be tremendous. So really looking forward to kind of this almost trajectory of growth for both sides and really bring in some really cool solutions to companies that
get to be like creative again and kind of like thinking about new solutions and new ways to develop tools and stuff.
We talk a little bit about, especially when I'm talking to candidates that are interested in working at SupplyFrame, it's kind of like continuing to be a startup, but still with some of the it's a security,
right? With some new resources,
exactly. Some resources. We've got now Siemens support and resources behind us, but we're still building new products and creating new opportunities for companies and being kind of on that forefront. And so you still get that entrepreneurial type of experience and that ability to, put your mark on something and really kind of push and evolve and change, an industry that is very, very ripe for it. So,
right. So we've talked about a lot of awesome parts of the industry and about being part of a startup, which I think is, a lot of the shiny parts, right, of the experience. But I'd love to hear, I know you have some good anecdotes of maybe some of the more stressful or nerve-wracking times that I'm sure that I think both sides get a lot of airtime as far as like startup, company stories and like scary founder stories. But I'd love to hear, now that we can say, we got to the other side and, we've made it to the successful acquisition. What were some of the times that you were like, oh man, like, is this going to work out? Or like, I really hope we get through this, this
there
moment.
There were plenty for sure. I mean, again, when you are on the forefront, sometimes that's a scary thing, right? You've got to convince companies, you've got to knock on doors and get them to talk to you. We had to bump up against people that they got the vision, but there's no way I'm going to be first as a customer. And what do you mean you're going to put my data in the cloud? Right from the get-go, we knew that this was going to be a hard thing to do. When you're ahead of your time, that comes with baggage, right? And you're really kind of being an educator and a champion for change. Like you said, that's not easy for everybody. So I think there was, some uphill battles just in the nature of what we were trying to do. There were plenty of times, we started in 2003 and then, the world kind of fell apart economically there a few years later, right? Where in around 2007, 2008, we didn't know if we were going to be able to make payroll at one point, right? While we were still trying to get up and running and become profitable. The good news is we had some VC companies that had really believed in what we were doing and were very patient and really helped us figure out how to navigate those tough times until we finally hit profitability in 2010. But there were plenty of times where we had to figure out, all right, if this isn't going to work, how do we figure out something else? What's a new avenue? We had to pivot many times.
We
had
to startup word.
jump into a whole new thing. We knew the supply chain, we knew the sourcing world. Like I said, Steve grew up in distribution. Many of us kind of knew that side of the business, but this whole side with, digital marketing and how you bring communities together. We had no idea what we were doing. We had to bring in outside help to help us figure that out. I mean, anytime you kind of embark on something new, it comes with the scary side of it.
Of course.
Now, luckily, for us, things worked. I think, not everything did. There were certainly some great ideas that we had that absolutely fell flat on the ground for sure. But being able to continue to pivot, be resilient, don't let it get you down, figure out what learnings did you have as a result of it and move into something new with those learnings and constantly kind of build upon it, I think is what SupplyFrame did very well. That is something that's kind of crucial. You want to kind of have your ability to kind of see the eye, keep your eye on the prize, see the vision, but know that your line isn't always going to be straight. It's very much going to be a zigzag kind of route. And that's a good thing, right? Because then it means that you're building with the kind of the knowledge of what the industry that you're in is asking for, or how the times, whatever's happening in the world at the time, are changing that journey, knowing that that's going to happen and accepting it and kind of riding the wave as opposed to fighting it and trying to control it never works. So I think that's something that we were able to do that helped us kind of get past some of these major obstacles that we hit until we finally, figured out what were some of the things that we could get our stride and build upon, and always kind of keep ideas coming, even though you're having success on something. Those are kind of the things that I think are the recipe for what made us successful.
Right. Always be ready for using the lessons and applying them to like new solutions potentially, or new routes
you hear
to
that
pivot to.
You hear that saying, fail fast,
fail forward, fail fast.
So you can so you can learn and pivot and move in a new direction, but never forget what you learned along the way, right?
Definitely. So we have a few questions that we ask all of our guests that we'll wrap it up with here. So one is, what's something outside of technology that's inspiring you these days?
Sure. So one thing I didn't quite mention, but is something that I have been becoming more and more involved with, is women's place in the business world, in technology, in the electronics industry specifically, and just, across all sorts of industries, really. We've really kind of embraced it at SupplyFrame. Women in Electronics is an organization that we've become a sponsor of, that we are starting to really see some momentum on what could be for women in the future, not only in this industry, but I also participate. I'm a member of a group called Chief, which is for women in at executive levels across all sorts of different industries, and really kind of being part of this movement and this awareness and these organizations of support and resource and education is something that I'm getting more and more passionate about. I kind of took for granted in certain ways that, I've always been in more male dominated industries for most of my career. And it's one of those things that you don't even notice sometimes because you just get so used to it.
Yeah.
But once you take a moment to kind of step out and really kind of focus on and educate yourself more about how widespread some of these issues are, and some of these experiences are, and some of these things that both men and women experience from, kind of changing times. Mm-hmm. That's really, really what is kind of keeping me excited about the future of business in general, and women's positions within the world, and being able to kind of grow in a way that's much more equitable, and certainly, creates more opportunities. So, thinking about it, yes, it's within our industry, but it is, as we know, kind of worldwide.
Of course.
That's something that I am getting more and more involved with, excited about, and thinking about ways that I can participate and help be part of the movement.
Definitely. I'm really excited to see the ways that we're able to use this collaboration with women in electronics at SupplyFrame to do more of that. And it's definitely something that, I've tried to design into a lot of our programming here at Design Labs. So excited to see all the ways we'll be able to work together on some of those initiatives this year and in the future.
Women rule. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm like, cheers to that.
Yeah, don't edit that part out.
Heck yeah. So, and last but not least, we always ask also, what is on your personal bill of materials?
Ooh, yeah, you did have that. That's one of the questions. I think that, it's a really interesting time for me personally, because I was able to kind of be part of the acquisition and being one of the early employees. That has been very good for me in terms of thinking about my future and being more secure in that way. I'm really at a point where I am trying to figure out, how do I continue to educate myself, and how do I put myself in opportunities where I can learn more. I'm looking forward to maybe potentially sitting on a board or two of companies and helping other companies.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. Chief actually has an avenue that allows you to get connected with companies that are looking for people. That's something that it's starting to bubble up for me a little bit as a future for me. And how can I play a part in that and help other companies and give guidance and support to companies based on my experience that are trying to do the same type of thing.
Absolutely.
I'm very much looking forward to, as we kind of grow as an organization, to continue to empower my team and setting up ways that help them with their own individual career pathing and development, connecting people to different resources to continue to educate themselves and figure out ways where they can figure out what they're good at and lean into it. This kind of concept of being intentional about your growth and development, and how do I help not only for myself, but also to impart that on my team members, my coworkers, my colleagues, my family. I've got little nephews that are starting to grow up that are thinking about the future, and how do I kind of help them and think about the ways that they can make sure that they're picking out paths that are good for them and right for them, and they continue to grow. So those are the things that are kind of what is part of my kind of day to day of, what's next for me. I think, when I think about my bill of materials, it's, that energy, that passion that is typically pretty natural for me. How do I start to instill that in my next chapter, whatever that is? Constant growth, constant learnings, making sure you're being intentional about it, spending time to educate yourself on topics you're not as familiar with, making sure to take time to pat yourself on the back a little bit on your accomplishments, and make sure that you stop and smell your own roses. I just made something up there. To make sure that you are acknowledging that your growth and your milestones along the way. I think, one of the things that I've learned personally through this whirlwind over the last 20 years, is that, when you're working hard and when you're leaning in and when you're doing things, to make something grow, you don't always take the time and stop and check in on yourself. And that's so important, to make sure that you're doing that. And so, that's something that I've been kicking around too, is ideas about how do we continue to teach people that. You don't learn that in school. There's not the, personal growth 101 class that you take in college. Are there things that we could be leaning in to help each other with those types of initiatives? So I don't know. That's kind of a list of not really individual parts and how many quantities I need, but that's... I
want to see the spreadsheet after this. Okay.
You can find it in the Design to Source platform by SupplyFrame. There
you go.
Is where that's loaded up.
There. Yes. Love it. Yeah. And in just going back a little bit to your nephews and that kind of thing, my baby brother just turned 11 today. It's his 11th birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah,
Owen,
we were just talking, Owen on the phone. And it's just thinking about their, my brother's futures and stuff, and the way technology is changing so fast. Isn't it just like wild to think like what even opportunities are they going to have, or how different the world's going to be in just 5, 10, 20 years. It's kind of mind-blowing sometimes, but it's also exciting.
We talk about like the general sense. I mean, I have my youngest nephew is almost 17 months, and already he plays his iPad, does his games, all that kind of stuff, which, I like, teach me some tricks, kids. I'm not really sure how to move the apps around. So he can do all that for me. But thinking about what their journey is going to be like. Another thing that I've been kind of paying attention to and just getting interested in is, we were forced through the pandemic for educators to learn how to use technology in order to stay connected to their students. And I think that was a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot hard for many individuals and for, educational institutions to figure out. But I think out of that comes this new opportunity for continuing to take advantage of that.
Right. And it really just accelerated what was probably, naturally the direction things were going anyways. It just forced people to do it a lot faster.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you do that in a way that continues to enhance and build and bring worlds and open up worlds to
and
kids?
Not water down experiences.
Not water down, not overwhelm, all the things that could be the downside. But there's something there. It's going to be interesting to see how technology continues to influence how people learn and how kids have their education journeys, and what does that mean when they come out? How different is their journey in staying connected, having access to information that we never did as we were growing up? It's going to be fascinating how that goes.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time today.
Absolutely.
And for giving us the quick notes version of the SupplyFrame history. I think it's great, a little more context for all of our listeners to understand our podcast and our space and what we're working on.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. I love looking back at SupplyFrame's history because it shows us how far we've come and how we sometimes take for granted how easily new tech gets integrated into our everyday lives. It's inspiring to spend time with someone like Sarah, whose passion is paving the way for other women in technology. Thanks for listening. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb. If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow SupplyFrame and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Design Lab at SupplyFrame Design Lab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a SupplyFrame podcast produced by me, Magenta Strongheart, and Ryan Tillotson. Written by Maggie Bowles and edited by Daniel Ferreira. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin, show art by Thomas Schneider, special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, the entire SupplyFrame team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. See you next week.